Hi, my name's Tooth. I'm a variety content creator over on Twitch, and I'm breaking into the YouTube space, and this is the Creators Create series. The Creators Create series is something that I'm starting because I make all of my own graphics for my streams, and I think you can too. We're going to be starting with thumbnails today. To understand the techniques that we're going to be using today, I want to analyze one of the biggest creators in the space, Mr. Beast. Let's take a look at one of his most recent thumbnails. How about this one? Or this one? Or this one? Or how about any of them? There are only a few pieces to a Mr. Beast thumbnail, and that's what makes it so great, and that's what makes it so easy to click on. If we take one of his most recent videos, for example, we'll see two things. Mr. Beast floating on a raft surrounded by sharks and the text day number 7. When you partner this with a really creative title, it just makes you want to click. It pulls you into the story. You want to say, I want to see what happened on day 1. All of the subjects in the video and all the things are always high contrast as well, and it pops on the timeline. This is important because when you're scrolling down through, you want to be able to catch somebody's eye. Before we start, I'm not saying copy another creator because I don't condone blatantly stealing content ideas. However, inspiration from other creators is a must if you want to grow. These techniques will help you learn to execute your amazing ideas and create thumbnails that borrow from some of the same elements that Mr. Beast and other creators in the space use. So not to drag out this intro any longer, let's get started on the thumbnail. Before you start, it's always important to collect all the images that you think you may need during the build. These are some of the images that I'm going to be using today. One thing you want to do before you start is understand what you're trying to convey with the thumbnail. You want to know what your title is going to be. That way you can start to pull together some of these elements so that they make sense. So when somebody's scrolling in their timeline, it really convinces them to click through the video. For this one, we're going to be making a video about making thumbnails. Now I'm going to be starting in Photoshop because it's the one that I like the most, but if you like using another photo manipulation software, feel free to use that one. All the techniques that I'm using and everything that I'm trying to create today can be done in another software. Photoshop is just the one that I'm the most comfortable in. Step 1. The first thing that you're going to want to do is open up a new file. I already have a YouTube thumbnail preset, but if you don't, that's okay. You can set up your size over here. I like to do it in pixels, and I like to do it at a 1280 by 720. That's the suggested YouTube thumbnail size. Once you have everything set, you hit create, and it opens up your new space. Step 2, find a photo of yourself or the subject that's going to be in the thumbnail. You're going to do a place, and we're going to pick this one right here. So I took this photo on a green screen, but you don't have to. You just want to make sure that you're high contrasted with the background so it's easy for you to cut out. The tool that we're going to use to do this is called the Quick Selection tool. So if you go over here in your panel, you'll see the Quick Selection tool, or you can hit W, and up here in the top, you'll see Select Subject. What Select Subject is going to do is it's going to use the Photoshop AI to select the boundary of where you are in the photo. You can see that it gets everything pretty well. It leaves a little bit of the green screen in here so we can zoom in. And to add to this selection, you would just click. To subtract from the selection, which is what we want to do, I'm changing the size of the selection brush here. You can do it either up here, or you can use the bracket keys down in the bottom. Once you have everything selected and it seems like you're going to get everything you want, we're going to make this a layer mask. To do that, you'll go over in the bottom right and you'll click Layer Mask. It's this rectangle with a circle cut out in the middle. What that's going to do is it's going to cut that picture out for you, but it's going to be non-destructive. So you can see it over here. If we disable it, it has everything that we have. The reason that we're going to do this is because we just want to clean up the image before we start working on it. To clean up a image that's on a layer mask, you're going to use a brush and you're going to use black and white. So black is going to take away from the photo and white will add back to it. And so we want to take away because we want to clean up some of the edges. You can see some of this like fuzz up here. I like to use either a soft round or a hard brush. Depending on the kind of edge that I'm getting, a soft brush will give you sort of a faded edge and a hard brush will take it, give you a harder edge. So I'm going to go around the edge here and I'm just going to clean things up just to make sure everything looks nice and crisp when I come in and edit the photo later on. Here's where you can really take some creative liberties. Even though something may be in a photo, it might look a little weird, so you can cut it up a little bit just to make things look a little bit more natural or fit the flow of something that you want to create. Perfect. And once we have it, we can apply this mask. So you're going to right click and you'll do apply mask and it'll have everything cut out. And so that image is totally cut out for you. I'm going to place it over here because that's where I think that I want it. And now we're going to move on to the next step. Step 3. Now, step 3 is totally optional, but if you've ever wondered how Mr. Beast gets that sort of cartoon effect, this is one way that you can achieve something very similar to this. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to click duplicate layer. Duplicate layer is going to give us another copy of ourselves, and we'll just keep duplicating layer until we have a million of ourselves. Just kidding. We only need 2, and we need it to be in the same place. So right click on your layer, duplicate layer, and we'll get a second one. Now we're going to make this an adjustment layer. I'm not going to cover in detail what adjustment layers are, but essentially a layer above it, and you make an adjustment layer and it only affects the layer below it. To do this, you'll hold Alt and you'll see a little arrow pop up and you can click. Now you can see that it's an adjustment layer. What we're going to do is we're going to add a filter on this. The filter that we're going to be using today is the camera raw filter, and we're concerned with just a couple items in here. The first one is going to be under your basic category, and that's going to be texture. We're going to lower the texture down somewhere in the -60 to -70 range. This will all depend on your photo, of course. And then the second one that we're going to look for is under the detail tab, and that's going to be noise reduction. You're going to want to take it up to the +60 to 70 range. And you can kind of see that it has that nice little sort of cartoon fade on it. And we'll hit OK. Now you'll see that it sort of muddied up the whole entire image, and that's not what we want because that sort of bleeds everything together and it's not very high contrast. So what we're going to do is make a layer mask. Once you have the layer mask, we want to invert it, and this will allow us to paint that texture back into it. To do this, you'll hover with your mouse over the layer mask and hit Control-I, and you'll see that everything goes away. Now remember, on the last one we used a brush tool to paint something away and to paint something back on. So in this case, we're going to use white, and this will paint that texture back on. I'm going to use sort of a low flow brush. So I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to do a low flow. I'm going to do this soft round, and that'll allow me just to paint it slowly back into there. So we're going to paint that texture back in there, only focusing on the skin. And this will help smooth that skin out, just to give it that sort of like cartoon feel. Now, if you wear glasses, this is going to be a tricky part because sometimes it'll blur the glasses in a really weird way. But if you focus on only where the skin is, most of the time it'll be okay. Now, I'm not going to focus on the hands or the neck at all because that will help me just focus on the face and try to create a lot of contrast on this face. Once everything's smoothed out and it's how you like it, we can move on to some of the other pieces. The next thing that we're going to move on to is creating highlights and shadows within your photo. To do this, we're going to make some more adjustment layers. We're going to go down in the bottom right, and you'll see this circle that's sort of cut in half of it's white. And we'll click on that, and we'll do a curves adjustment layer. We're going to make sure that we keep it in adjustment layer by holding the Alt, clicking, and we'll change this to an inverted layer mask. We're going to drag it all the way up, and that's going to give us our light tones. So this one will be our highlights, and we'll make another one. And just to show you what this looks like before we make it into a mask, this will give us our shadows. And then of course, when we make it a layer mask inverted, it'll go away and we'll be able to paint that texture on. So we're going to start with the highlights, and we're going to go with an even lower flow brush. I like to go somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. And you can change the opacity too, just to make sure that it doesn't look too natural or too faded. So we're going to start on this side of the face, and we're just going to highlight this up a little bit. And then we'll move on to the shadows, and we'll do the same thing. So if you ever run into a situation where you're not liking what you're seeing, you can just hit undo. That's Control-Z. And sort of get rid of that and start over with what you're doing. So we're going to go with like a 50% opacity because it was just a little too dark for me. Remember, what you're going for is just sort of like the highest contrast to the background that you can. And of course, we don't have a background in yet, so you might have to adjust this once we get the background images in. So once we're happy with everything and we think that we have it where we want, we can move on to some of the other pieces. To show you what it might look like if you have an image where your eyes are open or your mouth is open and you're wanting to show something that's a little more saturated in the eyes, like a Mr. Beast thumbnail would be, I'm going to open up another photo here and show you guys how that might be done. Let's take a picture of my friend Sherman Cool. His channel will be linked in the description below. Now, to make the eyes look a little bit saturated, this is the way that I like to do it, and it's not the way that everybody does it. But again, there's tons of different ways to do everything in this program. What we're going to do is we're going to make a solid color layer. We're going to change it to the layer about the color that you would like the eyes. We'll make it that an adjustment layer, and we'll invert that adjustment layer. What this allows us to do is come in here and we're going to change the opacity of our brush and the flow of our brush to pretty low, because if not, you're going to have some really unnatural looking eyes. And we'll go in here and we'll just paint this color slightly on. And now you can see the difference when we turn those off. So it just pops those eyes out a little bit more. And if you want more, you can change that opacity and play around with that. And you can do the same thing with the whites in the eyes, or you can add a curves adjustment layer. So if you add a curves adjustment layer, you can pull that up. We'll change that to an adjustment layer, of course, and then invert that layer mask. And then you can come in here and you can paint the white in those eyes. Again, you're going to want to be careful because it can look a little bit unnatural, so just be careful as you're painting stuff in. But you can start to see how that would make things pop when you're creating your thumbnail. Let's get back to our other one. So in this case, we have everything mostly the way that we'd like to have it, at least for this thumbnail. We might make things pop a little bit like these headphones, so we can make another curves adjustment layer. We'll just round those up, and then this way we can sort of stand out from the background when we put it in. We'll go ahead and paint this shirt as well. There's other ways that you can do this, and you can do a color replace, and you could even change the color of the shirt. But I kind of like the way that it's popping out here. So we're just going to leave that. And then I may do another adjustment layer, hue and saturation. I'll make that an adjustment layer here. And I may just change this saturation up a little bit. Maybe I'll pick the greens. I'll pop those greens out a little bit on the shirt there. And then we have everything we like, and we can move on to the next step. A bug trying to attack me. Step 4. So now that we've transformed myself into a likable YouTube personality, let's work on the other elements of the thumbnail, which are background images and text if you're going to add text in there. So let's gather the other images that we collected for this thumbnail, and we'll start placing them in. So we're going to go first with this background image. When you find images for your backgrounds and other things that you want to use, make sure that you have the rights to use that photo, or you're manipulating it enough to where it's free use. So we're going to drag that all the way to the background. I think for this case, I'm going to rotate myself. Sometimes you could rotate the image, but I think in this case, I'm just going to rotate myself here. So we're going to select all the layers, Control T, and we'll do a flip horizontal. And that'll just put me over on this side so I can look at that screen a little bit. So it looks like I'm looking at that screen. So in this case, we're just gonna adjust this in the image adjustment here. And so we're just gonna do a quick levels. And this will just help sort of differentiate us from that background a little bit. And so the way that this works is this one will change the blacks, this one will change that midtones and those grays, and this one will change those whites. So we're just gonna you know, sort of brighten this image up a little bit and then pull those midtones in. So I kind of like the way that this is looking. And then we'll add our next image in. And so our next image is going to be this old Photoshop screen. There's a lot of different ways to do this. The way that I'm doing it is just the way that I found the fastest. And most of the time it looks good for whatever it is that I'm using. And so I like to scale it to where it's about the size of the screen that I need. So I want it to be covering each corner. And then I'm going to do a distort, and I'm just going to drag this And then because this is another screen, we're going to do a warp also, and we're just going to warp it onto this screen. Helps give it that bubbled look that screen has. Once we have that in there, we're gonna make a layer mask, and we will just erase some of these edges with a really soft brush and a low opacity. And this is just gonna make it sort of fade into that computer screen a little bit more, give it more of a natural look like it's actually on that screen. Now you could call it done here, but we're gonna go an extra step, and because we talked about Mr. Beast, we're just gonna throw him in there too. We're gonna place his YouTube channel in that Photoshop layer. So we'll do the same thing. We'll just make sure that it's the size we need. We'll do a distort. So you can mess around with the blending modes if you want to, and sometimes these will help things look a little bit more natural in there. And so in this case, I'm going to go with a darker color one. It makes it look like it's sort of in that screen a little bit. I'm not happy with how something's showing from the background, so I'm going to do a warp. And I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to cover that up. Again, giving it the most natural feel that we can for the video. Step 5. The final step is adding text. Adding text to a thumbnail is the tricky part. If you include text, you want it to be large enough and short enough to be able to catch someone's eye who is scrolling through their feed. For this one, we're going to go with something simple, and it's going to be Creators Create. We're going to put it up here in this corner. And so right now you can see that you can't really see it. That's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to add a stroke around the edge. To do that in Photoshop, you're going to right click on your text layer, go to blending options. And then I already have one set up, but you'll click in here and you'll go into stroke, and stroke will allow you to change the color of it. So if you wanted it to be something different in your video, you can. In this case, we're just going to do black. You're able to change the size of it. We're going to click OK. And there it is. There's our thumbnail. One thing that I didn't mention throughout the video is saving your project. So you see mine's still Untitled 1. It's because we haven't saved it as anything. What you want to do is make sure that you're saving like your life depends on it, because the last thing you want is to lose work that you've been working on for the last 30 minutes to an hour and everything's gone. So we're going to do a file, save as, and we'll just save this video, Creators Create Episode 1. And we made a thumbnail. Thanks for watching my first video in the Creators Create series. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And of course, if you have any feedback at all, or you'd like to suggest something that you'd like to learn in the process, don't hesitate to write it in the comments. If you hate my techniques and you think they're stupid, let me know in the comments as well. After all, engagement is engagement. See you in the next one. Bye. See you later. Bye. Bye, everybody. We'll see you later.